What if I told you that the Amazons, the legendary warrior women of Greek myth, were real, not as a nation of man-hating superwomen living on a secret island, but as real, flesh-and-blood fighters who rode horses across the vast plains of Eurasia, fought in battles, and were buried with their weapons? For centuries, we dismissed these stories as pure fantasy, but archaeology has a funny way of digging up the truth. Welcome to 10-Minute History. I'm your host, Jake Sullivan, and today we're uncovering the incredible true story behind the myth, the warrior women of the Sarmatians. To understand these remarkable women, we first have to understand the world that created them. Picture an ocean of grass, a seemingly endless, treeless plain stretching from the Black Sea deep into Asia. This was the Eurasian Steppe, a land of brutal extremes. Scorching summers and freezing winters made large-scale farming impossible with ancient technology. Survival here meant one thing: you had to be a nomad. Life was a constant state of movement, following herds of sheep, cattle, and most importantly, horses. Your wealth wasn't land, it was your animals. Your home had to be portable, and your entire community had to be ready to defend itself at a moment's notice from predators or rival tribes. In this world, the horse was everything. It was transportation, it was food, and it was the ultimate military advantage. This lifestyle created a society where skills mattered more than anything else. If you could ride a horse and shoot a bow, you were valuable, regardless of your gender. Before the Sarmatians, this region was dominated by their cousins, the Scythians, who were also famous horse nomads. But starting around the 5th century BCE, a new confederation of tribes began to push westward from the Ural Mountains. These were the Sarmatians, and they would become the undisputed masters of the steppe for the next 800 years. They were a fluid alliance of tribes like the Iazes, the Roxolani, and the fearsome Alans. And it was their culture that took the idea of a warrior woman to a whole new level. For 2,000 years, our only real information about these people came from the ancient Greeks. The historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, told a fantastic origin story for a tribe he called the Sarmatians, who we now identify as the early Sarmatians. The legend goes like this. After the Greeks defeated the Amazons in a great battle, they put the survivors on ships. The Amazon women rose up, killed their captors, and were eventually blown ashore in the land of the Scythians. At first, the Scythians fought them, thinking they were young men. But when they discovered their opponents were women, they changed their strategy. They sent their own young men not to fight, but to try and win them over. The courtship was successful, but when the Scythian men asked the Amazons to come live with their people, the women refused. They famously said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "We could never live with your women. We ride horses, shoot bows, and go to war. Your women stay in wagons doing domestic work. We are not the same. If you want us as wives, take your inheritance and let's go live by ourselves." And according to the myth, that's exactly what they did. They crossed the Don River and started a new tribe, the Sarmatians, whose women, Herodotus claimed, continued their ancestral traditions. He even wrote that, "No girl may marry until she has killed a man in battle." For centuries, this story was seen as a fun but fictional tale designed to explain a culture that seemed bizarre to the patriarchal Greeks. And then, we started digging. In the 20th century, archaeologists began excavating the burial mounds, or kurgans, that dot the Eurasian steppe. What they found inside was revolutionary. They uncovered the graves of women who were buried not just with jewelry or mirrors, but with the full toolkit of a warrior. These were not symbolic burials. These women were interred with dozens, sometimes hundreds of bronze and iron arrowheads, placed in a quiver right by their side. They were buried with long iron swords, daggers, and even scale armor made from hundreds of overlapping metal plates. This wasn't just a one-off discovery. At sites like Pokrovka on the Russia-Kazakhstan border, archaeologists like Janine Davis-Kimball made a stunning discovery. In some Sarmatian cemeteries, as many as 25% of all graves holding warriors belonged to women. In a few cases, that number rose to nearly 40%. This wasn't a rare exception. This was a significant and respected part of Sarmatian military culture. But here's where it gets even more compelling. Skeptics could argue that weapons in a grave are just symbolic of a high-status family, but the bones themselves tell a story that can't be denied. Modern science gave us the final conclusive proof. First, DNA analysis confirmed, without a doubt, that skeletons buried with full weapon sets were biologically female. Then came trauma analysis, the study of injuries. The bones of these women bore the scars of a violent life. They had unhealed sword cuts on their skulls. They had arrowheads literally embedded in their vertebrae. They showed parry fractures on their forearms, a classic defensive injury from warding off a sword blow. The skeletons also showed telltale signs of their lifestyle. Their leg bones were often bowed, a common trait in people who have spent their entire lives on horseback. The muscle attachment points on their arms and shoulders were enlarged, consistent with the repetitive, powerful motion of drawing a heavy composite bow. These women didn't just pose with weapons. They lived, fought, and died as warriors. So who were these women? Were they just soldiers? The evidence suggests they were much more than that. Many of their high-status graves contain a fascinating mix of items, weapons on one side, and ritual objects on the other. Bronze mirrors are a very common find. These weren't just for grooming. In the ancient world, mirrors were powerful magical tools, seen as symbols of the sun, used for divination, and believed to act as portals to the spirit world. The presence of these mirrors, along with small altars and unique ceremonial headdresses, suggests many of these women were not just warriors, but warrior priestesses. They blended military might with spiritual authority, making them incredibly powerful and respected figures in their society. This wasn't a matriarchy where women ruled over men. Instead, it was a pragmatic society where skill and contribution were what mattered most. A woman who was a skilled fighter and a spiritual leader was a massive asset to her tribe, and their impact was felt far beyond the steppe. The Sarmatians, with their formidable female fighters, were a major power that clashed repeatedly with the Roman Empire. On Trajan's column in Rome, which celebrates the emperor's victory in the Dacian Wars, you can see depictions of Sarmatian heavy cavalry, known as Cataphracts, covered in distinctive scale armor and wielding massive two-handed lances called kurgans. These heavily armored lancers, both male and female, were the prototypes for the medieval knights of Europe. The Romans respected their skill so much that after defeating one tribe, the Eurasians, in 175 CE, the emperor Marcus Aurelius forced them into a treaty. As part of the deal, they had to provide 8,000 cavalrymen to the Roman army. And here's a detail that changed history. 5,500 of those Sarmatian warriors and their families were sent to the remote province of Britannia to guard Hadrian's Wall in the north of England. This is where the story takes a truly mind-blowing turn. Scholars have proposed what's called the Sarmatian hypothesis for the legends of King Arthur. Think about it. You have a force of 5,500 elite heavy cavalry warriors stationed in Britain, a permanent warband led by a Roman commander. This sounds a lot like Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. The commander of these Sarmatian troops, by the way, was a historical Roman officer named Lucius Artorius Castus. Artorius, Arthur. The connection is tantalizing, but it gets even better. The Sarmatians and their descendants, the Alans, worshipped a war god by thrusting a naked sword into the earth to create a makeshift altar, a sacred sword stuck in the ground waiting to be claimed. Sound familiar? Furthermore, the myths of the modern Arthurians, who are the direct descendants of the Sarmatians, contain stories that are astonishingly similar to the Arthurian legends, including a hero whose magical sword must be thrown into a lake upon his death, just like Excalibur, and a quest for a magical cup that provides healing in abundance, a clear parallel to the Holy Grail. It seems the stories told by these steppe warriors, men and women, were passed down through generations in Britain, eventually blending with local Celtic myths to form the foundation of one of our most beloved legends. So in the end, the Sarmatian warrior women matter for so many reasons. They are the historical reality behind the Amazon myth. They shatter the assumption that ancient societies were universally patriarchal, proving that other models of gender and power could not only exist, but thrive. Their legacy can be traced through the evolution of warfare, from the steppe cataphract to the European knight. And their stories may very well be the seed from which the tales of King Arthur and Camelot grew. They are a powerful reminder that history is full of voices that have been written out of the official records, and that sometimes, to find the truth, you just have to start digging. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know down in the comments. If you found this interesting or learned something new, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to 10-Minute History for more deep dives. Thanks for listening.